Welcome back to another episode of the Pickle Pulse. I am your host, Brian Green, and today we have a special guest. I just reviewed their paddle, the Arrow by OM Pickleball, and we have founder and CEO. I just know you as Jonny. What's your full name, Jonny?
Johnny Jabot, but I don't usually give out the second one simply because it's French and most people pronounce it wrong.
So it's like
B-A-U-D.
a EAULT kind of deal?
Sort of like that, yeah.
I just butchered it already. Well, Jonny, I appreciate you taking a few minutes with me, man. I enjoyed your paddle. And I appreciate you sending it out, and there's lots of good stuff to talk about. But before I even dig into any of the nitty gritty, I always like to know just a little bit about your pickleball story, how you found the game, what attracted you to it, and then
Oh,
in the end, what like caused you to or want to be part of the industry and the business.
yeah. Well, you're killing me with the paddle thing. I gotta have it as a racket, otherwise it hurts me. I die a little bit inside. But
That's
yeah, I mean,
awesome.
I got into pickleball and kind of designing these pickleball rackets just short of a year ago now, the late summer last year, and I kind of fell into it. My wife had kicked me out of our other company, not the house, just the
Mhm.
company. But, I'm kind of an entrepreneur at heart. So after a couple of years, once the company's established and we have staff in place, I'm not very good because I get distracted by shiny objects and new ideas, and eventually people get annoyed and I get kicked out. So it happens at pretty much every company I start.
Okay.
So my wife had kicked me out of that one. And it just so happened a friend of mine sent me a text that afternoon and was like, "Do you want to play pickleball?" Which I'd never played before. So I popped out for an hour, and as sometimes happens in pickleball, 7 or 8 hours later, I returned to a fairly exasperated wife, wondering where I am. And I said, "My love, I know what we're doing. We're going to start a new company. It's going to be in pickleball, and we're going to design pickleball rackets because I think it's a better tool than the paddle construction they currently have.
Hmm.
And we'll get the tennis players in and see what they do to the sport." So as you
Wow.
can imagine, she was not best pleased, but she'd been married almost 10 years to me now, so she kind of gets used to it. And here we are, a year later.
Wow. Okay. So you were immediately hooked to the game. What caused you to fall in love with it? Do you have a background in tennis or any other paddle
Oh,
sports or
I don't. I played cricket at quite a high level when I was back in England,
a
but
game I do not understand at all? I am so sorry.
nobody does. Even the players don't understand it, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
But I don't have a background in tennis. I know some very good tennis players, some very high level D1s that went semi-professional and professional. And really, what attracted to me mainly was the people. Like when I went down and played, my previous businesses had been in things like we have a high-end wedding planning firm, and I'd done some food distribution. It was just different businesses. But when I was playing for those 7 hours, just it was incredible watching people play, watching 70-year-olds play with 20-year-olds, watching men and women play together, the age range. And because pickleball had that kind of easy barrier to entry, and then you had that low learning curve, it was addictive. And I got my butt whooped by a 60-year-old who not only beat me, but also had smack talk, which honestly upset me a lot.
I love it. I love it. The
And
smack talk
I'm
is so
pretty
important.
sure, yeah, his name's Greg. He's actually now part of our story. He's here in Missouri, very nice guy, but I hate him. So and I don't sell to him now, and I've got my staff to not sell to him. So everyone at our local court knows Greg and knows he's part of the story.
So you're like the
Whooped me so
Seinfeld guy
bad.
where you're like, no racket for you, no suit for you.
Absolutely none. He's on our like we have one blacklist. We have a blacklisted arm, and it's just got Greg, and that's it. It's not even a name because everyone knows who he is. We don't even know a picture. But
So
yeah,
good.
he whooped me and had lines. That upset me a little bit. But mainly it was just seeing this. I really felt when I was playing now that there's something here. These people are playing together. Everyone. I've never seen people lose so badly and enjoy losing.
Hmm.
And so from, being an entrepreneur, I'm always looking for the next thing. And I saw this happening. I'm like, these guys are committed and passionate. And I always see people slightly as consumers and customers. But
Hmm.
and then the other thing was I didn't understand why everyone was playing with like a paddle type construction. So when I was playing, I talked to a lot of people there, and I did what I usually do, which is beg, borrow, and steal just about everything that people are playing with and try
Hmm.
and buy off them if I could. took it home and broke them apart to find out what was going on, because most people couldn't tell me why they bought their paddle or what it played with. And so when I broke them all apart, they all kind of looked similar and the same, and paddle construction is fairly uniform. And
Hmm.
I just basically had an idea that tennis, and people are going to hurt me for saying this, but I felt like pickleball at the time seemed like mini tennis. And
Okay.
why weren't tennis players playing, and why weren't we using rackets? And this is kind of before I knew the rules and solid faces and various other things. But it set that idea in motion, like this game should have rackets in it. I feel like we'll get better performance. And so that was the genesis of the idea. And we sort of grew from there,
Yeah.
much to my wife's disdain, at least
I,
initially.
I love it. It sounds like you're also like me in the creative ADHD world where everything
100%.
interests you. You want to try it, you want to get better at it, and then eventually you're like on to the next thing. And
Absolutely. My wife tells me I have a 3 year shelf life from idea to getting kicked out of the company. It either fails on its own or somebody kicks me out. And it's pretty accurate actually.
hey, well, winning for you, she's held on to you for 10 years. That's awesome. That's like three times the
It
normal
is not
stay.
easy to be married to me, I can imagine. She will attest to that. That's why we're not going to let her on the podcast, because it'll be
Well,
a
I won't let
conversation.
mine downstairs either. After 18 years, she
I
just puts
love
up with
it.
me at this point.
Wonderful.
So tell me just a little bit about OM Pickleball, the company, the name. Where you're based out of? Is it St. Louis? Is that, do I remember that
Close.
correctly?
Kansas City, Missouri.
Kansas City. There we go.
Right in the
Okay.
heart. Yeah.
Yep. And that beautiful accent of yours doesn't sound like a Kansas City accent.
I'm not
How
sure
did you end
about
up
the
there?
very mongrel accent. Well, it began very British. I grew up in Liverpool and I spent most of my time in London, but I traveled for a decade before I settled in the States. So it's a kind of a hybrid of a lot of places around Asia and South Africa, and it's fairly mongrel. So I appreciate I appreciate the beautiful aspect, but compared to the normal British accent, I think they've got me beat.
Yeah, well, they're just a little too proper. I like yours.
I love it. The downgraded version of the British.
Exactly, exactly. It's like the Australian when you get those two mixed up, you're like, come on, I can tell the difference. You should be able to tell the difference.
That's what I get a lot, Australian or South African, which isn't
Yeah.
too far off.
Well, I believe it. So tell me, you fell in love with pickleball. You get this
Mhm.
idea for the company, and is there a story behind Ohm? Is there something to the name?
Yeah, well, there's one that my wife likes and one that my wife doesn't. So let's do both, shall we?
Okay,
So
let's go.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'm a product designer. I'm an industrial designer by degree. Most of my companies are around building products, and I've built products for, United Nations, the British government, very. So I'm used to this type of structure, and so when I was starting OM, or at least before OM was even a thing, I was getting addicted to pickleball, playing a lot more, kind of breaking apart things, throwing out designs. I had a manufacturing plant that I used for other companies, so I was able to very quickly talk my engineers over there, get some sketches out there, and get prototypes made. And
Hmm.
as I was pursuing this, I kind of go probably much like you, all in on things. Like I have no off button. I have a all in until I drop it on Tuesday and never speak of it again type mentality. But the all in mentality can be a bit jarring. So my wife knows this about me now. So she saw me disappear off to various courts and all sorts of weird things that I was doing. And when I would come home, she'd be like, okay, so are you getting kind of addicted to this pickleball thing now? And I said, well, only minorly addicted. Like it's only minorly. It's an issue. I can stop. I can quit at any time. It's okay.
Hmm.
And then as the weeks and months progressed, she comes back and like, I think your only mindly is progressing. And I was like, probably only majorly now. And so that was our running joke. So when we decided on a brand, it was kind of like only mindly, only majorly. Well, the next step has to be full addiction, which is on. And
I
so that's
love
the real story. And then obviously it's quite nice because Arm can help us as a positioning statement. So we want to be an omnipresent brand in the pickleball space in the rackets.
it. Hmm.
So we were trying to change the conversation and move people from paddles to rackets because we believe that they have better performance. And so we want to be that omnipresent brand in the racket space. So it's quite aspirational as a name as well.
Okay, okay.
That's a lot less boring than the first one, which is the true story, which my wife
Hey, I like it. It was a good story, and good stories always win. So I initially reached out to you because of the shape of the racket. and how it connected to the paddle face. And I wanted to know whether or not that flexed a lot or how it felt, and what would be different about your racket. And then I found out about the construction of it. Can you tell me just a little bit about your idea? And then secondly, it seems like making that frame would be very difficult to wrap all that carbon around. And
More
so
than you could possibly know. More
it
than you,
was it
yeah.
like,
It is a complete nightmare, an
yeah,
absolute nightmare.
it was it like a
It
Ben Franklin fail of 1,000 times and the thousand
The
first.
first one, yeah. I mean, it took 9 versions just to get something that was actually usable.
Okay.
The first version was and I made the mistake of only creating one concept that I brought out and proceeded to shatter it into a million pieces within like 3 shots.
Oh
Because the
no.
double thermoforming process, you have to thermoform the racket frame in fluid carbon, and then you basically wrong side. Then we fuse the core into the frame. So it's unlike a paddle design where the core is actually the main structure. We have a monocoque frame in that the frame and the skin that goes over with the core inside creates the structure, which gives it that string bed feel.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big thing on the racket frames. It gives not just the weight on the edges, which gives you that stability and gives you that feel. Because it's a racket frame, just like a tennis racket, you get that feel back. So we fused the frame inside, and then in the first thermoforming, in the second thermoforming, we're putting fluid carbon over the top of it and forming the whole thing. So there's no glue, there's no adhesives, and that is an absolute nightmare, without doubt. It
Mm-hmm.
is not easy. Each one of them takes 3 to 5 hours to make,
Wow.
which is tricky. We're reducing that, and obviously we're approaching this more like a Tesla approach. So the first one is the Roadster, which costs more, and it takes a long time to build. But our goal is to introduce rackets to the sport, and obviously we want a sub 200, a sub $150 positioning, and we're working on how do you actually scale this thing. But at the moment, that internal racket frame really gives you that string bed feel and the feedback, and that was important. And so if it was me, I would just have strings in it, just like a tennis racket, but there are rules. And so we have to have a solid face over the top. And the trick is, having that formed around the frame is key. We could have done it cheaper. We could have just put face materials, a bit like paddles, straight on top, so disconnected from the frame. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem is when you lose that 360, basically omnidirectional fluid carbon flow around the frame, then you lose practically half the performance because it's that construction. Now, the problem being is it's pretty tricky to get the temperatures and the curing time correct, which actually creates a good product rather than a wavy mess where the carbon just flows all over the place and looks like waves across your face.
Okay.
That is a nightmare. And we're getting better every time, but I would not recommend going down that path again. However, for the performance, I think it's worth it.
Okay. Okay. Well, that was my first take when the paddle actually showed up. Was it seemed very sturdy to me and very well made. And then what I found is after playing with it a couple of weeks, I really beat it up and tried to do my best to hit it hard and play my game with it, which is drive first and drop later.
Yeah,
And
I love it. Me too.
it, it was awesome. I mean, it held together beautifully. There was no
Mm.
chipping, there was no peeling. I didn't even put edge guard tape around the outside, and got a couple of scuffs, but it wasn't horrendous. And
Mm.
then the other thing that really intrigued me about it is that mini trampoline effect. And I hate to use those words because
Yeah, it's a
they're kind
risky
of
one right
voodoo
now,
right
right?
now,
Injuries.
but you could feel the ball compressing into the face, and you could
Mm.
feel that extra little bit of control that comes along with it, especially in resets and hitting drives, and it allowed you to grab the ball and make it dip a little more. So kudos to you guys for that. The other question I had is, any particular reason you guys decide to go with a more standard shape the first time with the 8-inch wide
Yeah,
body? And
yeah, I regret it. I regret it. So, I love the standard shape. It's great for doubles, and I play pretty well with singles. So does our pros. But basically, we were designing a racket for 4.0s and below,
Mhm.
and at the time, I was trying to go for more of a mass market. And obviously, during the time of my development, the more elongated power versions became more prevalent, and so I still feel that most people that are under a 4.0 would do better with a wide body or a more standardized frame, bigger sweet spot, more stability, more feel. I think like the overall extra half inch you can get on top or half inch on the handle for most people is wasted.
Mhm.
But that's what from an engineering point of view, that is true. And that's what I base things on. Again, with industrial design, half of that's engineering. So you kind of solve problems from what is actually reasonable. But of course, that doesn't take the psychology of how people play, and everybody just wants an elongated version. So we have the Aero 1 Pro, which is our elongated power version coming out, hopefully
Okay.
by the end of the year. Just because we have so much demand for that. And I get it. I mean, in singles, I could now do with, for 4.0 and above, you don't really need as much extra space. You tend to hit it more clean in the sweet spot. And so that extra reach and that extra power and a little bit of extra length on the handle for the two-handed backhands is definitely advantageous. And so I wish I had one now, considering how many people reach out for it. It's just these things take a long time to develop, longer than I would like. And yeah, so really the original rule was like, how do we get it close to a tennis racket in terms of shape? And then the goal was always to then create the pro version and have an Aero 1 and an Aero 1 Pro. And then using the Apple type approach, an Aero 2, an Aero 2 Pro, Aero 3, Aero 3 Pro. Make it very, very simple for people. Because
Yeah.
from one of the struggles I have with the industry right now is I can never tell whose paddle is the latest one, the greatest one. There's so many names. It's almost like what Microsoft was doing before Apple came in and was like, we have an iPhone and we have MacBook, and that's it. And then we have an
That's it.
iPhone Pro, we have a MacBook Pro. So I basically I just stole the best ideas from Apple.
Oh,
And
that's smart. It's a decent company, as both of us are using this.
exactly. Hey, if we can get even a fraction of a way there, I'll be happy.
Yes, absolutely. So every time you're creating a new racket, are
Mm.
you having to go to the press and create a new frame, a new shape? And is it going to get to the point? I would assume it gets to a point where you have like 3 or 4 shapes, and then
Mm.
you just do different variations of those. Is that kind of where you're headed to?
Yeah, so designing the frames takes forever.
Mhm.
It takes months or so to create these, because these molds are big. If you know much about the thermoforming process, you've got table size solid steel molds, and for the most part, you're guessing on the shapes because you don't really know. I mean, you can run the math a little bit, but you don't really know how it's going to perform until it comes out of the mold. And
Okay.
so creating the internal frame is the hardest. So when I have the Aero 1 and the Aero 1 Pro, what I'm planning on doing and what I'm doing at the moment, we're releasing a series of concept rackets, which are not USAPA approved right now, but they're basically allowing people to test out different cores, different faces on the same frame.
Okay.
And so they're not tournament approved, but it allows us to iterate much quicker, get it out to the market. And my hope is that eventually we will obviously come down. We've got an isometric frame based on the Yonex type approach from tennis that we're
Hmm.
developing now, which will probably become the future shape of our frame because we can also protect the shape of it. And I'm imagining that that's pretty close to perfect as far as shape for us. And then we'll have one of those in Aero 2 and Aero 2 Pro, and then we'll be able to hang different cores and different face materials as well as a bunch of other very, very cool stuff that we've got developing
Oh,
around those
fun.
frames because it's a lot quicker to innovate the cores than it is the frame because you
Okay.
have that 6+ month lead time. And if it doesn't work, you're screwed, which really hurts deep down. We blew up one of our Aero 1 Pro frames because I was trying to get a little bit ambitious in what I could achieve and it cracked it. And
Oh,
3 months is down the line. So you're just like, oh.
so every time you're developing one of these new rackets, are you getting like 5 or 10 of them made in the same shape, and then just trying to put them through the test to see how they last, the quality control aspect? Is that essentially what?
Yeah, fundamentally, a lot of the time, I mean, at the moment with our concept series, I typically have 10 to 30 concept series of cores made up. At the moment, we just released one called the Aero 1 Evo, which is an absolute rocket launcher, totally illegal.
Okay.
You can't use it in tournaments. If anyone buys it, don't use it in a tournament. Wear safety glasses because this thing is a beast.
Is
And
that
it's a
because
lot
it's
of
a
fun to
foam
develop.
core like some of the other
Yeah,
Evo
it's like a
ones?
modified foam core that and once you it's like if you imagine the vice, but then multiply it by a racket frame, it's just ridiculous pace, just
Yeah.
unbelievable. my pro is clocking in serves at just some stupid pace. And so it's very fun to play with, and a lot of people have bought them and are just having a lot of fun with them. But
Hmm.
originally, when we were doing those, I get 30 of them made. I have a series like our elite. I send them out and they just play with them and give me the feedback, and then we modify them. And then if they're good enough, I'll release them as a concept series. And then from that, a bit like Selkirk Labs. So at the moment we're building our we're currently calling it a pulse core. We're not sure about the name, but that's a variation of our Evo, which will actually be legal. So we're
Okay.
toning down power, making it legal. And so we'll release a concept series of that at some point. Again, get market feedback, and then basically move on with what works best for the most people. That's our goal.
I love it. I think that last answer was a great lead into the next question, because the governing bodies of pickleball are constantly changing. They're changing the grit levels that are out there. It used to be deflection tests, which I think is a very poor test, and I think they're coming up with a new version of that. How do you, as a manufacturer, handle that? And then how do you feel about the target constantly moving?
A couple of glasses of wine every time something changes in the industry and it wrecks everything you've been building for the last 3 months. The only way to do it is a couple of comedies and let's be honest, a full bottle of wine. That's how I handle with it. I wouldn't recommend it,
Yeah.
but
I
it's
mean,
yeah. I mean, jokes aside, it's hard. I mean, at the moment, it's early days for the industry. It's early days for pickleball. These things happen. I
mhm,
understand it. It doesn't make it any less challenging, especially for the smaller brands and the brands that are innovating. Like
mhm,
even now at the moment, we have some. We're not sure exactly what the tests are, what we're designing to, and that makes it more challenging. So at the moment, I'm currently making 3 to 5 iterations of one of our cores simply because I don't know what the exit velocity is going to be. And
mhm.
so I'm trying to not lose time by waiting and also developing. And so that's part of the reason I came up with the concept series cores, because we're spending so much time developing these things and they're so much fun to play with. And
Mhm.
I released the first one, the Evo, just to see if people would care. And honestly, most people just haven't cared. They just want to play with new, interesting. And I put all over the site, this is not approved right now, probably will never be approved. It doesn't carry any of the logos, but people have really just enjoyed playing with new racket framed cores and everything else. So we're going to fortunately release a lot based on the stuff that we're doing. But yeah, to your point, it's challenging. We've got potentially 2 governing bodies now. There are some issues around that. There are some challenges in how they're set up. It's not easy. It's the one thing I would say is, tennis and golf and cricket and football, they've all gone through these stages. So did baseball. It's
Mhm.
kind of part of the course. It's a bit tricky to navigate if you're in it at the moment, but also everyone's kind of doing their best. And sometimes it's a little slower than we would hope. Sometimes you have to write things off. And I waste a lot of money on wine. But other than that, yeah, I think it will all be worked out. And I think we will have a great setup eventually. I'm hoping
Mhm.
that sooner rather than later because it's better for the businesses, it's better for the innovators, and it's definitely better for the grassroots players.
For sure. For sure. And well, and I feel like the people, I guess 8 to 12 months ago, it was who can get the most powerful paddle the fastest, which
Mm.
broke the industry in a way, and that you've got to rein things back in. But now it would be great, and I'm kind of with you, if they would just set some standards before the end of the year,
Yeah,
and
I
then
mean, and you see that everywhere. A lot of the guys that buy our Evo, I tongue in cheek said, if anyone's playing with a Gen 3 in a rec play, grab one of these and, more than even the score. And people took that to heart. And, that's tongue in cheek, but it's the case, the regulatory bodies have a lot, things have sped up. We do need some form of regulation that people can apply by too, because it will speed up innovation. It'll make it better for everybody.
uh-huh.
Because it's slow. If you don't know what you're designing to or what specs or whether they'll be upheld, then it's challenging to design effectively. And so it just makes things a bit slower, and that's worse for every player.
Yeah, makes sense. The other thing I really like to ask all my paddle manufacturers is there's one paddle still on the market that is a rocket launcher. It was well made. It's a really nice paddle. I can't play with it because it's just too powerful. But how is the gearbox still legal?
Well, I'm not going to get into the politics. It's the same with the UPA. I have my own opinions on it. The one thing I would say about Gearbox is I appreciate their innovation. Like Raphael and everything he does, he's one of the few guys that actually has legitimate utility patents. He has been in the industry a long time. He's a very smart engineer. He knows what he's doing. Um, the Gearbox Pro I like. I've played with it a lot. It is very, very powerful. Who knows? One of the challenges at the moment is, a lot of the smaller manufacturers, I think, like myself, are benchmarking against the gearbox as potentially the top limit of the exit velocity, but it might get banned, in which case we were wrong. And so that's the challenge. I won't really go into anything more than that. Like I appreciate the innovation the gearbox brings to the table because we need more of the innovation. Part of the reason I got into the industry is because there was a lot of sameness, shall we say. A lot of the companies are fairly similar, and
Mhm.
you need a couple of people that are out there, shaking things up. And Raphael, for sure, is one of those guys.
Oh, he shook everything up and really changed everything. He created that race to power because
Hmm.
the guys that like to hit it hard like I do that can figure out how to control those paddles, they must
Yeah.
have a tennis background or some background that I don't have, but I can't seem to keep them on the court. But the way that he put that paddle together, it is effortless, just
Yeah.
and in
Yeah.
power.
And that's like you said. I mean, you can't say it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a thing. I
Yeah.
appreciate it from an engineering. It's a feat of engineering that I wouldn't have taken on simply because the quality control on trying to have that many units, compartments that have to be engineered and produced at that and any one point is a failure point is insane. But all credit to him. I mean, he went for it, he executed it exceptionally well, and people loved it. And honestly, I'm a little jealous. but but as far as the industry goes and how is it still legal and will it still be legal in the future? I don't speculate, but I just have to figure out my own rackets based around what's going on. But to your point, the sooner we can get a little bit more assurity, the better it is for everybody.
Mm-hmm. The last thing that I prep for you is when we talked the first time, just about the paddle, I had mentioned, the new skins that are coming into the game and the new faces. And to me, it seemed like your racket body would be the perfect way to create something where you could slide skins into the paddle or
Mm,
put them onto the paddle without having to put it over a face and create essentially a new paddle. So all the reviewers out there that are talking about these new skins say that they're great. You get the grit, but it changes the paddle each time. One
yeah.
thing I guess I'm excited about is if you could come up with something. Is that something you've thought about or something that you?
It's something that's in development. So I'm good friends of one of those skin companies, and we're working on working title Era One R1, and we hope to have something out, which is exactly as you said. There's a lot of options, as well as replaceable cores and a whole bunch of stuff when the regulation comes. But skins for sure, having a templated frame like this, which actually is built for the skins, and so that you can replace the skins of different weights and different textures in order to create more power or more spin, depending on your gameplay. So there's a lot of really exciting things that are coming out, but it all depends on regulation
Mhm.
because as of now, regulation doesn't allow for that. Not easily anyway, but there is a lot of exciting and if nothing else, the Almera ones are virtually indestructible, as you pointed out. Unless you John McEnroe this thing into the floor repeatedly, it's more likely to take out your knee than it is to to
Yeah.
actually to break. And so the failure point on that is obviously your surface texture, because like pebbles on a beach, eventually it will wear down, which is a shame because these Era ones could last years and years and years, like a tennis racket, if you can restring them, if you can
Yeah.
refix them. Like a tennis racket can last a decade if you keep restringing it. Obviously, the Aero ones you can play with, and we've got some of our pros playing with ones that they've had for over a year, and they still play with them. But right in the sweet spot, it's shiny because it's just been polished to perfection. Now, fortunately, a lot of the spin and the grab comes from the racket face deflection. But if we could replace the faces, then you've got a far more sustainable, something that you don't have to buy every 3 months. You buy it once, it's solid, and you basically restring it or reface it. And you can modify those faces depending on the type of play you want to do. And that's really exciting. And we've got that all in development, ready to come out as soon as the regulation bodies allow it.
Okay. Okay. Well, I really hope they hurry up because, well, I'm reading Agassi's Open book right now, listening to it on Audible. But that's one of the things he talks about towards the end of his career is his coach talked him into trying a different set of strings to change his game up. And the idea of being able to buy a high quality racket and then let's say I'm headed to the US Open and being able to slide in a fresh skin, knowing that I've got my ultimate grit, I've got the core that I want, and walking onto the court knowing that this is my, I'm really excited about my paddle because we all know in winning
Yeah,
tournaments, confidence is huge. You have to believe you can win. You have to believe in
absolutely.
your equipment. And
Yeah.
I'm just really excited for that innovation. And
And that's kind of it's the small parts of that point when you get to the 4.0 and above level. Yeah, like you said, you want to be able to go out, and our hope is at some point in the future you're able to pick an Aero One or an Aero One Pro frame. You're able to have the core that you're most comfortable with, and literally depending on the player you're playing against, if you're playing a more cat and mouse player, you can switch out your skins, put on a more grit-based skin that's going to add to spin, slow the game down, give yourself an advantage. And then in the next game, you might be playing against more of a banger. So you
mhm.
switch out skins again, put an extra heavy skin on it, get some more power, increase the swing weights. And you're really able to just change the nature of your game based on something that you use every day. That's exciting to me. And if the regulation ever changes, we have a whole host of ways to basically up rev. Very similar to how tennis rackets are.
Yeah.
You respin them, you rechange a lot of things to get it just to almost to pro stock levels. And I hope that at some point we're able to do that with pickleball rackets and potentially pickleball paddles as well for the other brands.
Let's do it, Johnny. I'm in, man. That sounds just amazing. I'm such a paddle nerd, and to be able to constantly customize it, I mean, between each matches, that's really cool. That's
Yeah,
an exciting concept.
very, very, because it brings a whole new level to the game, doesn't it? Because you get to research your opponent, you get to understand their game at a whole new level, and you can adapt your tools as well as your gameplay to your opponent. And I think that is where you really get high level, like 4D chess going
Hmm.
on in the pickleball space, which is exciting for everybody, all players from, the pro players down to the 3.0 potentially.
Oh, that's very true. And you could have a full setup for 4.0 less or 4 to 4.5, depending on these are the specifications. I mean, you're the detail guy. You're the smart one in this conversation. I'm sure you've thought of all these things, but again, I'm very excited about the innovation that I think is coming. And then the other question that I like to ask all my guests is just where do you see pickleball in the next 2 to 5 years? Do you think there's going to be 100 million people playing it worldwide? Kind
I
of
hope
what's your
so.
thoughts? Yeah, me too.
Um, I think he's got a very good chance. I mean, pickleball is one of those incredible phenomenons, and I really do call it a phenomenon because there's very few sports, if any, that can cross the age barriers. You can have 12-year-olds and 75-year-olds. You can have men and women, and you can have people. It's got such a low barrier to entry, as I said. And it's like the ultimate gamification. You have instant feedback, unlike something like tennis, where you can spend 3 months trying to work on a serve and really not have anything worthwhile. You can be coached for an hour in pickleball and have a decent serve that's going to get you in the game.
Hmm.
Within a couple of hours, you're playing, and you can have a couple of hours of coaching, and your game's going to improve incrementally. That's like the gamification of sport. That instant feedback loop gets people addicted. It's like the TikTok version of sport. And so you kind of need that. You need that, that red message icon. You get that in pickleball. Every time you go out, I've never seen people go out, lose, come back out and have more fun again. That to me means that it's simple, it's relatively low cost, it's easy to get in. You have a very shallow learning curve with an instant feedback loop, and it's hugely social, which the society needs that right now. we have lost the ability to connect in groups and to spend time with one another. And not to wax too philosophical, but I think, it has been missing. And I think pickleball is one of those things that has come along that has brought a lot of people together. And I think that's going to continue on. So I see no reason why. It's got all of the makings to be a 100 million person player sport. And if you look at what's going on in Asia and India and Europe, pickleball alongside paddle is blowing up across every country, every user group, every city really. And I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. And I really hope it continues the momentum, and that all of those involved, we don't crush it, shall we say, like we keep it flourishing.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one of my concerns too, is that the current governing bodies and the people that are controlling the top pickleball players, the PPAs and MLPs of the world, seem to be trying to create a bit of a monopoly at the top, to, make sure they have their hand in a little bit of everything. So let's hope that there's nothing malicious there. And,
I mean, either way, it's a grassroots sport. It's a grassroots sport. As I said, I've had a few companies now, and I've never had a consumer base. I've never had people reach out and send emails to my team or to myself, essay-length emails about how they've enjoyed what we design, what they would improve, what they want to see coming forward. I mean, that's just an addictive consumer base, and it's a grassroots based. And people talk about it; it becomes part of their lives. And at the same time, at least, I talk with a lot of the small manufacturers, the smaller brands, and we help each other out. I've never seen that before. So there's a lot of grassroots stuff that is going on that I don't think people see, and there's a lot of hope for. And I see a lot of these reviewers that you guys all connect, and I've seen a lot of the YouTube channels of some of the other, even my competition, but they're all so passionate about what they're doing, and that to me is indicative of huge potential for growth, because there's always going to be some actors that maybe have a different approach to it. I don't think it's going to go that way because of the grassroots nature of this sport, and that's exciting.
I agree. Well, Jonny, I appreciate your hot takes on everything, man, and I am really excited about what you're doing there at OM Pickleball. I know everyone can find you at, is it ompickleball.com? Is that correct?
Yep.
And I'll put that up on the screen down below us here so you guys can see that. And then before I let you go, anything else that you wanted to hit, or any questions you had, et cetera, to finish out?
No, just to say, I've only been in this industry a year. I'm very appreciative of everyone, from yourselves, like the reviewers and the other manufacturers, and mainly the consumers and the customers. I mean, it's honestly, from my experience doing this for 25 years, there is no other industry like this. There is no other company to be involved with. There's no other customers like the players that I have the privilege of, working alongside. Literally, it feels like I'm working alongside them, because they send so much information on how they think I should improve stuff. Some of it is just borderline insane and illegal, but still hilarious to read, and I love it. And some of it's just pure genius. And so, I'm just really grateful that I have an opportunity to be a part of this, and it's wonderful to have yourself and other reviewers really kind of bring a lot of these great brands and companies to the forefront, because I think the more we get it out there, the more innovation we can have, the better it is for the players at the end of the day.
Well, you keep creating kick-ass rackets. I almost said the P word. See, I follow. I don't know if you've ever heard of Jamie O'Brien, but I'm a huge surfer, and he's one of the big YouTube guys, and he created the word psyched instead of stoked. And so when you're on his channel, if you say the S word, you have to do 10 push-ups. So I feel like I need to do push-ups over here to the side.
Well, I've already thought I'm gonna have a printout that we don't use the P word here, and have it up around the warehouse so all my staff can do it. And maybe I'll implement a 10 push-up thing.
That's right. Well. Get everybody jacked.
Perfect.
Jonny, have a great rest of the evening, man. And to my listeners out there, reach out to OM, reach out to Jonny. He will answer your questions. His team will. The paddle is very well manufactured. I had a ton of fun playing with it. And if you're enjoying the content that I'm putting out, I'd also appreciate you hitting the subscribe button, like this, and tell me about my hair. Jonny likes it. He's wearing a hat.
I do like it a lot.
Or anything else that you want to say. I love the interaction. Until next time, I'll see you on the courts. Thanks, Jonny.
Thank you.